Water tank upgrades. Last year, just before winter, we barely got a line over to this water tank and had dug a trench from here all the way to the outdoor kitchen and the camper. So we had just gotten fresh water to pressurized water up to our camper before winter hit. However, over here where the electric and everything else goes up into the building, that's where our water went up in the building. It's kind of tore apart now, but here's where the pump is, and the line came down and went into the pump. We then attached a garden hose here, went out through a hole there and into the top of the tank, right where that white cap is. This small box was insulated and we had a heater in there. Being on solar power, we barely had enough power to actually run that heater. And this line that was in the building that went up and along the side wall actually froze more often than I wanted. I underestimated how little sun we'd have. This is facing the west side, and while when the sun did shine, it warmed up the wall and kept the water line unfrozen, even when it was sub-zero. We had too many days where it was cloudy, and it just let the water line freeze more than I wanted. And we ran this heat wire along it, which we could also run, but our limited power made that very inconvenient. So we opted to let it freeze most of the time. Being PEX with no fittings on it except for down in the box, I had no concern about the pipe bursting. It just froze up and we had no water for a week or two, which we just put a line in the big tank and siphoned it out. Thermal mass of the tank is big enough that it keeps it from freezing. The other struggle we had was we didn't have a pressure tank but a pressure switch, so whenever the line is pressurized, the pump would shut off. Even if you ran half a cup of water out of the faucet, it would kick the pump on and repressurize the line, and then the pump would continue to run for 8 seconds using a lot more power than necessary, and every time it started it would surge, which of course draws more power and is more wear and tear on the pump. This year we've upgraded to a pressure tank, which is pretty standard on wells and everything else that folks have in country living. We just don't have a well, we have a tank. We also opted to get a smaller pump. The surge is going to be less, and it actually seems to work really well. Being a 230 volt pump, it's more efficient with power usage, and it should be less hard on the inverter, and less of a surge means I don't have to worry what else I have plugged in and running at the same time that the pump decides to kick on. I will be building a box here just like I did up in the other pump for the winter time and putting some insulation around it, but I'll be hopefully relying on more ground heat to keep it warm rather than just inside the building, which stayed pretty cold. I do have a wood stove in the building, but with no insulation in the building it would have been a lot of wood just to try to keep the line from freezing. And again, last year we didn't even have any firewood set aside, being the first winter, so we used all of our firewood in the camper. I will also run some heat tape on this line because it's not going to be buried as deep as would be nice, although I'll probably end up putting a black mat on top of here, which it may actually help significantly, a black rubber mat, and may help keep it from freezing. And then this line I will tuck really tight to the tank and insulate it. I'll actually build some framing around it, but I will be utilizing the thermal mass of the tank that keeps the whole tank from freezing. As the line runs up next to it, that will also keep the line from freezing up. The only spot I'll really have to worry about is up at the top. Ideally, we'd probably have some kind of penetration down here where the line would go in, but I just hate the idea of making holes in the tank, plus I'd have to empty it out, which would be kind of annoying. And a big reason why I'm actually going in the top of the tank is I have a coil that goes and wraps around, and that thing actually is on a float that goes up and down and stays 18 to 24 inches below the surface. These tanks have multiple layers. There's a whole like study you can look up about ecology of a tank, but there's a sediment layer and there's a surface layer, and there's more layers, but those two are the main ones, and you get most of your debris either floating on the surface or down in the sediment layer, and keeping that hose below there keeps us from sucking up any junk. Because I actually haven't, when I had the garden hose it was the same principle and I never got any debris. I've never had faucets, shower heads, or anything clog up, and we've been running out of this tank for 8 months, something like that, 9 months maybe. I guess, yeah, we're getting close to a year, but it's been really neat to see how well it worked out. My filtration on the water tank has been doing really well. The treatment with lactobacteria has been going good as well. We will get the trench filled in, the walls built, and get it insulated with our heat tape and continue the tour. Getting this little building wrapped up. We've got pallets on 3 sides, and the corners, of course, were short because I'm not cutting down any of the pallets. Over here we've got this post that obviously fills that corner. Here I just ran another piece of a pallet, mounted it to the building and to the other pallet next to it so that the door will fit right in this opening. As I'm doing this, I'm making sure that we get plastic on it immediately so that if it decides to rain or get really windy, I don't lose all my insulation. These other corners, I just put insulation behind it and then wrapped plastic around it. Eventually, the plastic will not hold up and I will need to do something else. But until I acquire some supplies for less than retail pricing, this will buy me at least a year probably. Got the door wrapped in plastic. Just going to make a fairly level dirt spot down here. We can stand it in place. I'll end up figuring out some kind of simple latch system, probably out of 2x4s or something like that. Rather than do some kind of weather stripping, I basically just have the fiberglass that kind of sticks out of here a little bit and out of here just a little bit, and that actually makes a very nice, you know, seal. It's not going to be perfect, but it's actually going to do really, really well at keeping the wind out. Does the same thing up against the post on the other side. Insulating the pressure tank and the well pump. It's not exactly outdoors, it's got a roof over it, but it's under the building. And we don't have a well, we have a storage tank, but we've got to insulate all this and protect it from freezing. And the best way to do that for really, really cheap is pallets. Essentially going to frame 3 sides and a door on the front. Since most pallets have 2x4s, well, they're not exactly 2x4s, but they're the same dimension as a 2x4. You can insulate with standard R13 fiberglass bats. Before I stand all the pallets up and actually build it, I'm going to insulate them first because it'll be a whole lot easier than trying to crawl in there and stuff the insulation. These pallets are 4 foot by 40 inches, and it works out pretty good to use the bats that are designed for 24-inch on-center framing. I could cut a little bit off if I wanted to, but it's really not crumpling it too badly, and I still should get a really good R value. If you happen to be doing this while it's raining outside, don't let the paper get much wetter than that. But preferably try to do it not in the mud and not during a rainy day. Don't let me make this look easier than it is. This was all planned as far as the height being 40 inches tall, being able to sit underneath here, and 4 foot long matches up perfectly with the 4 foot by 40 inch pallet we used there. And on this end, I believe I'll have enough to go up to here and actually maintain a full 4 foot height, which will be great because I sure could cut the pallets down, but I don't want to, and it's just easier this way.